Welcome back to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky alongside my brother Mark, and we have a big time striker on the show today, Kaitlyn MacBean, the Minnesotan, crushing it for the Penn State Alliance, like she's been doing. We know that. Kaitlyn, thanks so much for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Let's jump all the way back to when your insane, unearthly hot streak started last year in the NCAA tournament. You just absolutely catch fire. 2 assists versus Central Connecticut, goal and assist versus Santa Clara, 2 goals and assists versus St. Louis, goal versus Clemson in that tough 2-1 loss. But just a ridiculous tournament performance. Do you remember things feeling differently, like like a switch flipped or something unlocked for you during that NCAA run?
Um, I don't know. I remember feeling a lot more pressure than I usually do, which makes sense because it's win or go home. But I don't know. Our team had a really good mentality approaching the tournament because we thought we could make a deep run, and so we kind of just sent it and gave it everything we have. We have this phrase called "empty the tank," and so we focused on that and just gave it everything while we were on the field. And I honestly think I attribute a lot to that.
Yeah, empty the tank. I like
Empty the
that.
tank. I love it.
Yeah, is it do you yeah, how often do you scream that on a game day? Is it like everyone screaming it all the time, or is it just like hands in, empty the tank?
They always say that like right before we go on because like we have a really deep bench, and so we have a lot of good players on the bench is something that we like consider our strength, and so it's always like go empty the tank, we'll put the next one on, and then they'll go and then put the
Yeah.
next one on.
I love that. Well, it is funny too because in NCAA soccer with the subbing and it's very common, especially for attackers, to get spelled or whatever. You actually play pretty high minutes, like for a
Yeah.
forward. It's there's been a few forwards in the Big Ten the last few years who sort of break that mold, but. Yeah, empty the tank. It is good because there are times when I'm calling a game or watching a game, and like if a sub comes on and isn't working harder than everyone else, I'm always like, yeah, but shouldn't you be,
Yeah.
just like going nuts? Shouldn't you just be like absolutely burning
You
it
have the
right now?
most energy. Our subs are really good at that though.
Yeah.
Like even yesterday, some of our subs came on and like up to the level, which was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, nice. Well, and we started with last year just because that really, I think, probably nationally really put you on the scene just because it was an incredible performance, but in all of these national tournament games. But you've really kept that same form going basically all season this fall again. So you're just insane. 13 goals on the season, and still some games to go. Obviously, Big Ten tournament and the national tournament. You obviously can't jinx it by saying it. We can say it. You will be in both of those. You get so much attention for obviously the goal totals and even like the people seeing the video and like, oh my God, what a cool goal. But I'm curious what specific things you are really proud of in your game. If you could get other than just like I scored, the way you score and how you score. Obviously, there's so much that goes into every one of those individual plays. If you could sort of get credit for those individual pieces of your game that you're most proud of, what would some of those things be?
That's a good question. I think the biggest transition for me from club to college was like the defending aspect. Because in club you could kind of get away with whatever you wanted. Like especially as a 9, you didn't have to do too much. And so I think that was the biggest switch for me was when I realized that like the press actually starts with the 9 and like they're the first defender. And so I think focusing on that and actually setting myself up from our defending to attack is something I'm really proud of because that took a lot of time. We have a very specific way that we defend, and it takes a while to actually understand the cues that we have. And so I would say that because that sets us up for a lot of goals, especially in the transition moments. So.
Yeah. Are you talking that sort of the specific way you defend? Are you talking about in particular like how you cue like when to press and like the reads you have to make as the 9 and then sort of midfielders are reading off of you?
Yeah, we have quite a few, but we kind of do the you go, I go type of thing. So typically if I trigger, the 10s behind me will go as well, which is cool because like I know they're always going with me.
Yeah.
But obviously if you don't all trigger together, then there are good teams in the Big Ten. Like they're going to get out.
Yeah.
And so I think we've spent a lot of time on that.
Yeah. Because I'm like the most annoyingly consistent fan of teams running a press. Like I want every team to run a press. I think it's a solution to everything. I think it solves offense. I think it solves defense. Like I'm a complete monkey brain for it. So seeing teams that run it well is really so attractive because it creates all this activity. Does it help you sort of stay locked in because you have to be making those defensive reads? Like does it keep you sort of really, really locked into the game?
Yeah, and I think it also just puts me in a really good position to attack right after. Because if I'm pressing the center backs, they typically have a bigger shape. So the slips right after are always on because of that big shape.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioning it makes it easier for you to attack brings up another thing I'm curious about, because I sometimes when I'm describing like the way the run of the play works, especially in college soccer, is like, so, like for example, sometimes the Gophers play best against quality teams, like when they play you and they play Ohio State, and I think part of it is because the other team is playing open. You know, they're
Yeah.
attacking, they're willing to create space, and then that in turn means that when Minnesota does get the ball, or when the team does get the ball, you're operating from space. So
Yeah.
like, you know, for you, your goal against Minnesota is such a great example. You have, you know, you have great footwork and you do all these great finishing touches at the end to beat the defender and beat the keeper in your post, but it all starts with you sort of spraying out wide and
Yeah.
getting out on the run, and then you get into that finishing space. But I'm curious for you, sort of operating in space versus those tight spaces, how is that mindset shift in terms of, okay, I'm out on the run on a 40-yard burn, and now I'm in the box, I'm trying to cut across the center back. You know, those, is it a mindset switch in terms of, oh, I'm fully out track meeting this person, versus, oh, now we're dancing in the box and I have to out
Yeah.
footwork them?
It's interesting because I actually have a lot more through ball goals this year than I ever did last year. Like most of my goals last year were like the footwork type of thing, like in the box. But I don't know. I don't think my mindset changes that much because it's always like just get to goal. It's like be dangerous, get to
Yeah.
goal. I don't. I
Yeah.
would say like on breakaways more, my mindset's more like calm finish. Whereas like if I'm going 1v1, it's more like get at them, like that type of
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
that's the only mindset switch I would say that I have
Yeah.
in those two situations.
I'm curious. It might be the breakaways that did this too. I was looking up your stats from the last few seasons, and it's funny because your stat totals from the first season you were playing obviously aren't as big, but I think a lot of that is just because the minutes were lower. But if
Yeah.
you actually look at sort of the per minute production and even like the XG, your XG per game was right around half a goal both of those first two seasons. But this year it actually almost doubled. You're at like 0.82 XG a game, which makes sense because you're scoring basically a goal a game. But I wonder if maybe that sort of chance creation jump is from those sort of through balls too, just because
Yeah.
you've been so lethal on them this fall.
And I think last year I had Peyton Linehan next to me, obviously, and she was
Yeah.
a very like strong through ball forward and like ball and seam three is what we call it.
Right.
But I was more like back to goal, and now we're only playing with 1-9. So I think that's also part of the switch because I have to be looking for both. Whereas last year I always knew she was going to be pushing the back line and I was coming under.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's part of it too.
Yeah, you had to sort of provide that check almost. Well, and so I'm curious to go back to the start of your Penn State career. You know, you don't play right away because of injury. I think both of those first 2 years, which is absolutely just like nuts and terrible, obviously. But how did those early seasons shape your mentality? Because obviously in hindsight, someone can look at your stats now, look at your career now and be like, oh yeah, she was hurt and didn't play, but then eventually she broke out and got this opportunity and scored all these goals. And like, it looks all sunshine and rainbows once you've had the scoring seasons that you've had. But for you, you know, sitting those first couple of years, like how was that mindset for you? Like how did you stay engaged and sort of feel a sense of purpose even when you weren't able to be out there contributing on the field?
Yeah, so I knew I was going to be out for my first 2 years just because of the timing of my ACL, with it being right before like the COVID spring season. Like the 9 months was going to take me through. And so I had conversations with like my coach, my trainer. So I knew like I had to prepare myself either way because it wasn't changing. And we talk a lot about like owning your role. And so I think that was something that I focused on a lot when I was injured because I wasn't going to change the situation, but I could make the best of it. And so I still watched film. Like I went to some of the like film sessions with people that were playing and did that just so like when I could come back, I actually understood our cues and put myself in like a good position for when I came back to actually get minutes. And I think that paid off for me because typically like coming in, obviously freshmen don't play a ton here just because you don't know Penn State soccer.
Yeah.
And so I think putting myself in a position where I understood the tactical side of our game like set me up really well.
Yeah. Well, and when we had Caroline Birdsell on, she missed her first year because of an ACL as well. And one thing she talked about was I noticed sort of she was getting called a bunch for fouls and she like always looked really exasperated, and not in like a forwardy whiny way, like in a truly surprised, like, wait, what the hell? Like, why am I getting this call? And she talked about during her recovery, like you talked about the film aspect of it. She talked about because of all the rehab work, she actually came back like much stronger. Like not necessarily, not like faster and more burst and whatever, but specifically a lot stronger because of all the weight work and all the performance work. Did you notice that too? Because you're someone that has a pretty strong frame. Like you play really solid, and you've always had, I think, like a strong base to operate from. But did some of that come because of all that recovery work and all that rehab work?
A lot of upper body time when you can't do lower body.
Yeah, lots of upper body. Yeah, I definitely felt really strong when I was coming back. I'm not sure if exactly like I was stronger than before, the same. I definitely wasn't less, I would say.
Yeah.
Like you said, like I've always had a pretty strong build, so that's something that like I had in my game. And I didn't lose a ton of that, but I never felt any weakness like in my knee or anything when I came back. Like I felt strong in both my legs, which I think some people feel like an unevenness when they come back, but our trainer is great and she put me in a really good position to come back. So I felt strong coming back.
Yeah. Had you done a lot of like lifting and performance work before college? Like, had you done a lot of that like in your youth career?
I did some. I honestly didn't put as much effort into it as I probably could have, but I played hockey all the way up until freshman year. And so I think that is kind of where I got some strength.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I got some of my build, just because playing hockey and soccer set me up pretty well. But like I did go to the weight room, like I would say twice a week in high school, but I wasn't putting as much effort into it as I do now.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious because especially we cover so much college, and when you see so many players go from like basically 18 to 22 in that college career, that's a time when people naturally sort of build, you know, like muscle and whatever and strength, and their, you know, their frames develop, whatever. But because you all are such high level athletes, like we see players go from being like, I remember like Maddie Gaffney told the story about she came into college weighing like 97 pounds or something and left like 135 or whatever. And that's a crazy amount of like growth. But like for you, do you notice that with the younger players of, that physicality, like not just playing in the Big Ten, but like for a very, very good, you know, contending team every year, do you notice that sort of adjustment and the need to sort of get that strength up?
Yeah, I think we definitely have people that come in and gain a lot of strength right away.
Yeah.
And we have freshmen that redshirt a lot, and I think that's typically their main focus then.
Yeah.
Like once they're redshirting is to gain a lot of strength, because the Big Ten's a pretty strong conference. Like we get into our tackles and all that.
Yeah.
And I remember like talking to Dave Alberti, my club coach, and like about Minnesota players coming up where they just needed to build strength because the college game is so much stronger overall than the club game. Like you can get away with just being like small and shifty in high school, but you can't get away with that in college because players are strong and will push you off the ball. And so I think there is a gap, but honestly, we have a pretty good program where there isn't too much of a difference once players come in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I went out to LA and was talking to the Daily Bruin reporter who covers UCLA, and it sort of blew my mind that they had a really high yellow card count, because I wouldn't think of that as being like a part of what UCLA does in their game. And I asked, I was like, hey, you know, like early on they had like 4 yellow cards or 5 yellow cards in like 3 Big Ten games or some crazy count like that. And she actually said part of it is that they don't really know how to play physical. And so when they would play Big Ten teams, they were like trying to learn how to play physical, but they didn't know how. And so they were crossing the line a bunch. Like they would. And so that was kind of funny of like, it's because they're not physical enough that when they try, they're like just fouling the shit out of somebody. Like it's just, I don't know. I don't know if you notice, like it feels like that type of dynamic, like yellow cards in a game getting scrappy, is something that really just flows game to game. Like I don't know if you notice this, where if another team is like a really scrappy, like foul the hell out of you, yellow card you team, it sort of makes you play a little more like that. Have you seen that trend? Because I feel like a game is either really, really tight and no one's doing any funny business, or it just gets scrappy as hell and it just snowballs.
Yeah, we always talking about Nebraska because they're a team that like really gets into their tackles and like slide tackles and will get into you.
Yeah.
And so approaching that game, they always tell us, they're like, we focus on our DNA, which is like getting into our tackles. It's not fouling, but like getting in and winning the ball.
Yeah.
And so when we play a team that fouls a lot, sometimes it feels like we don't have that aspect of our game where like we're winning the hard tackles just because we're getting fouled all the time.
Right.
And so we can sometimes notice it just because, I mean, it's hard to keep going when you continue to get to get fouled. Like, that's honestly hard. And it's funny, we just played UCLA obviously on Thursday, and we were told, like, at halftime, we were like, they have way more fouls than us. Like, they're getting into us way more than we're getting into them. And so we were like, we need to actually get in and make a tackle, because we were kind of just waiting and hesitating, and that's not how we play. Like, we get into our tackles as well. We're in the Big Ten.
Right.
And so I think, like, recognizing that at least at halftime was big for us, because we were like, okay, we need to bring more of a Big Ten soccer. Like, they're not used to playing Big Ten teams. Like, we're a Big Ten team. Let's show it.
Yeah. That's great.
God, I love talking about tackling. The only thing I was ever good at. God, I love just talking about getting in on players.
Yeah.
Effort, and work rate. The only skills Mark and I ever brought to soccer.
That's all you need.
No, well, you know, if we were even capable of like passing and shooting, that could have been good too. But who knows? It's funny you mentioned like getting into players and playing physical, because I think people might assume like a high foul team is always like a high yellow card team. And in my experience, they don't always really correlate. Like, for example, Penn State and Minnesota are the two lowest yellow card teams in the Big Ten. And I think when you watch them play, you see that. Like, I think yellow card, actually, like when I'm scouting games and prepping for a broadcast, I think yellow card count is actually one of the most like defining, always accurate like aspects of a team. Like when someone has a high yellow card count, they almost always play like it, like everything you would assume about a high yellow card team. But I'm curious for you, like when you're doing those scouts, and you talked a little bit about sort of the coaches giving you that guidance, but when you're scouting a team, or when they're giving you sort of the pointers, or even when you're watching, you know, in film or whatever, are there any like key stats or key things you always sort of trigger off of like, oh, I know I want to look of like, oh, the center backs do this, or oh, and you know, we don't have to give away the scouting report, Kaitlyn. Don't worry, you don't have to give it away. But
season, people they can watch how Penn
there's plenty of type already. But yeah, are there certain things like when you look at like a stat sheet for an opposing team, or when you watch film on an opposing team, things that you sort of always find yourself noticing or looking for?
I guess something specific for like center backs for me is I notice if they go like really hard in 1v1.
Yeah.
Then that's typically when we focus on like just pulling the ball back and letting them blow by us, like that type of thing.
Yeah.
We don't spend a ton of time on like the foul count unless it's like unusually high. Like I know Lincoln, Nebraska, we talk about it just because they are an aggressive team.
And by the way, everyone in the Big Ten talks about that with Nebraska. I've had coaching staffs have told me like there's been times where a team has to play Nebraska, and listen, all due respect, the Huskers were great last year. Like they're whatever. But I will just tell you, coaching staffs have literally told me like when Nebraska is one of the later games on the season, they're like, God, I don't want to, because the coaching staffs are literally nervous about players getting injured.
Yeah.
Like that's how much of a thing it is.
Yeah, well, they get into their slide tackles. That's like the biggest thing that we always say is that they always slide tackle, and they're going to like take the ball out and your feet from under you.
Yeah.
And it works for them. I mean, like that's how they play, and they had a ton of success last year. So good for them. It's just not how most teams play.
Yeah. So other than that, you were gonna say like other stuff you pay when you know, unless the foul count is super crazy. Yeah. But then what are some other things you look at?
Honestly, just really that we focus on ourselves more than the other team in that aspect. Where like we want to win more tackles than them, and we compare like our stats from one game to the next, because what something like we try and focus on is like it's about who we are, not who we're playing, and like our own game, because it shouldn't change from game to game. Like we should have like similar stats from game to game.
Right.
Obviously, it'll vary a little bit just depending on how the other team plays, but the coaches will show us like our stats in those aspects, and like we'll look at the difference like as the games go on. And so I think that's something that's important to us, but we try and focus on like us.
Yeah, totally. Well, and that is such a classic thing. You know, if the oversimplifying it would be like, are we preparing for the opponent, or are we trying to take our game, you know, and imprint it on the play or whatever? That's sort of, and you know, coaches just handle it differently. But I had also forgotten. So we've talked about it a million times, in part because I'm going to be calling all these games. But the Big Ten tournament is in Minnesota this year, so you are going to be playing at Elizabeth L. Robbie Stadium. I had to look it up. I couldn't believe how long it's been since Penn State was in Minnesota, and it was before sort of you were a mainstay. So I don't think you've ever played at ELR, right?
No, I didn't even travel that year, obviously, because I was injured. So I've never even like been there for a game other than like in high school when I was in my recruiting process freshman year.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
And so you will be coming to Minnesota along with, the rest of the 10 total Big Ten teams here for those sort of 4 or 5 days. What's it going to mean for you to be able to play? I mean, obviously, I'm sure your friends and family have found ways to come watch you out in Pennsylvania and all that stuff. But what's it going to mean to be able to play in front of all these hometown fans? And I'm sure a ton of your former teammates can be here, your family can be here. What's that going to mean for you?
I mean, it means a lot. I have had a lot of family members that haven't been able to come out. And so I think for them to actually be able to see me play in a college game, I'm really excited for that. And I don't know, like I obviously went to Penn State for a reason, but I think it's really cool because I love Minnesota, like with all my heart. Like that's where I grew up. And so I think to like bring my team there and play, it's going to be really cool.
Wow.
And it's going to be a super exciting weekend. I mean, it's going to be unreal. Like these games are going to be so competitive. I've never been able to watch a tournament like this because it's never really been hosted like this other than when they were doing the neutral site Indiana stuff, which was, to be entirely honest with you, like super insane. It was just in the middle of Indiana, but it's in Minnesota this year. And so it's at least fairly likely that the 4-team cluster for Thursday night is going to be in some mix or match Minnesota, Penn State, Ohio State, and Wisconsin. So a ton of Minnesotans in the mix on those teams. And then so likely Penn State plays on that Thursday and then possibly on that Sunday after you win on Thursday. We'll call it right now. We'll pre-call it. But excited to be able to watch you. And and last, Kaitlyn, we can't get you out of here without doing some very random trivia. So we're going to pivot. We're going to get kooky.
Okay.
I had no idea this number was so outlandish. So sorry to Penn State. I hadn't been internally giving you the credit you deserve. But they have the most Big Ten championships by a lot.
Yeah. By
Do you know how many?
I want to say like regular season, it's like 17 or 18.
Yeah, at 20 as far as what Matt said. Yeah, 20.
I knew it was up there. I didn't know how much.
Well, and by the way, shout out to whoever puts together, and obviously it's updated every year, whatever. The historic, like the history, the record books document for Penn State is so ridiculously thorough and expansive. Like
I guess when you make a lot of records, you do that more because some teams don't maintain those very. I can say I've checked teams that are like 2 years behind. Teams that make records, I guess, maintain them.
It's insanely well done.
Our media guy's insane, so he's really into it and does a really good job.
So makes it easy for us. We got to find things to ask questions about. Who is second? This also would have surprised me, although it's a much lower number. So I'm guessing a lot of teams are close. But do you know who is the second most? It's not who I would have guessed. It's leaning on some history times.
Oh my goodness.
You being on this show and the three of us and our site is a hint.
Minnesota, baby. It's Minnesota.
Is it Minnesota?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They have some runs, baby. Shout out to Erin Chastain when she played. Was she there for some of those, right?
I think so.
How many do they have?
They have 4. So it's a pretty big gap. But
I didn't know it was Minnesota. I would not have guessed that if we're being honest.
2016, the most recent. They won the double that year. That was sort of the Simone Kalander, Rashida Beal era. And then 2008, the last time before that. And then the others were in the 90s, I think.
Yeah. So unsurprising based on that many titles. The next question is just about the NCAA tournament streak, which is epically long. UNC maybe has a longer one. I'm sure maybe a couple others. I don't know if anyone does. But do you know how long the streak is for Penn State making the tournament? It's longer.
This is hard. Is it like 27?
30. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I'm only a few years off. That's not that bad.
That's right. You learned these things when you came in. So then
maybe that's what it is. I just feel like I remember them like posting on Instagram. So I'm trying to think back to like what it's like our 27th or like our 30th straight NCAA. That's what I'm trying to think about.
When you make it this year, it'll be 30.
30 will be Oh yeah. So you're very close. But then talk about the other thing in terms of records. Speaking of players being in contention for the Herman Trophy, the best college player of the year, Do you know the last person from Penn State to win that one? There must be some graphic of
Oh, I know. That's Rocky.
Rocky Rodriguez.
I knew that.
God, that's a good name.
We just saw her. She came to the hotel this weekend, so we got to meet her.
Oh, I'd love to know if she was named after what Rocky she was named after.
No idea.
Well, it's like Raquel or something, but dude, she is so rad. She is so rad.
She's legendary.
Well, yeah, and I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, the people. Those are. We're talking about like another Penn State player who's a Gopher coach now, Maya Hayes. Like she had a season where she scored 31 goals. And she didn't win that trophy. So I mean, you have to do a lot to win. But can you and I just gave one part of that away. But yeah, so Maya Hayes, she also played for the national teams at Pentz too. Legend. She was a Penn State scorer. And do you know how many goals she had in her career? She's only
she had 31 in one season. So
31 in one season. So yeah, I helped you a little. She's only third with her total, which is shocking when you hear the number.
Third. Okay. Maybe I would say like 50, like around there.
No, you're not going to catch her, Kaitlyn. It's 71.
71. Dang. So, I'm not even going to get to
honestly,
31 close to there.
31 in one season is so nuts. I think that season is like the all-time single season points record too. But just like Maya, what are we talking about?
It'd be like averaging like 35 points in basketball or something.
Yeah.
It'd be like averaging 45. It's so crazy.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's really wild. Yeah. Wow. And this is a great trivia. I didn't know this one either. I wait to learn on the podcast. Only one other Minnesotan has played for Penn State. Do you know who that was? It was a long time.
I have no idea.
Was she alive?
I didn't even know there wasn't any Minnesotan. So
you could read maybe at this point. I don't know. It was someone at the end maybe. It was Sophie Hiller.
Yep, Hiller.
01 to 04.
Yeah, I was born in 01, so.
There we go.
Oh, Max, can you imagine how gnarly we looked in 01 to 04? The hair.
Oh, yeah. Terrible hair back then.
Our hair was your length, Kaitlyn, at that time.
Terrible. By the way, Sophie, if you somehow are watching this, love to have you on the show. Reply. You're probably still crushing it somewhere, coaching, playing.
Probably, honestly. Or as a really, really good coach for her kids or something, yeah. Mm-hmm. Your major is biobehavioral health, which... crazy. That was my major too. But for people who didn't major in it, explain what it is to the people like who might major in political science or something.
Yeah. It's basically just, it's a more like general science. It's similar-ish to kinesiology, but it looks at like all aspects of health type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so like it also looks at like the mental side and all that, which I thought was really cool. And all the classes just like vary in different aspects of health and like how they affect health, which is cool.
I know.
That's cool.
That's kind of a bad way to explain it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, this is that like the more interesting way to be pre-med or something?
So I could have technically like declared as pre-med, but it's just too much with soccer to actually declare that as your major with everything else you have to have for the major. Mm-hmm. And so like there are a few of us, or I guess 2 right now on the team, I believe, that are like pre-med, and the other one, Amanda, is biology like she's a biology or like science major, I think, is just the name of it. And so the way I did it was I took all the classes necessary for med school, but then also took all my biobehavioral health classes because that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, crazy, dude. Crazy.
Unreal.
We meet so many players who are doing majors like that where I just wouldn't have I guess my demand was being in student government and choir, but I can't believe that when I hear some people doing pre-med with D1 soccer. We love it. We love to hear it. But yeah, glad in the 5th year you have a little more room to like focus on playing, at least in the during the season, and then you can. Yeah. I'm sure you'll get probably a 4.0 after. But we love asking people about their other sports from previous times. We were talking about. You were saying how you played hockey, which is cool. By the way, what did you play in hockey? What position?
Center and left wing. I quit like right before the beginning of my freshman year. So it was like before anyone was like really specialized and focused on that.
No time for defense with Kaitlyn. She's always going at. She's looking forward. She's not looking back. But you won the 4x1, which is like the best in track in high school, which is maybe the most fun race to watch, like in track. I like it more than even like the 100. Are you the fastest player on your team?
No. Well, it's funny. We have some really, really fast players.
Rank yourself.
Rank myself?
Yeah.
Number of fast of the team.
I don't know. I'm definitely top half for sure.
Okay.
We have some really fast players. A lot of our freshmen are really, really fast. So you have.
Were you robbed of it with the injury? Are you slower partly because of the injury?
I don't think so. I honestly don't think I'm slower at all because of injury. Last year it was definitely Kaitlyn MacBean was our fastest. She was insanely fast, and she's showing that in the NWSL right now. Amelia White's really fast. She's very fast as well. And Aubrey Culpa, she's been stepping in for me at the 9. She's very fast. And then some of our freshmen are really fast as well. So I would say probably after them, around there.
Nice. You can shout out the other 3 people. Who else ran the relay with you?
Oh gosh, this is quizzing me.
Shade.
Oh my gosh, this is actually really quizzing me because we were surprised. It's Paige, Sailor, right? Paige, Sailor.
Sounds like Gen Z names. Yeah.
Well,
Those sound right.
In that.
And keep in mind, we wouldn't be able to fact check this, so you could just say another.
I can look it up. Yeah.
But if I say the wrong name, I feel like that's worse.
Kendall, who ran the closing leg of it. Yeah, no, I'm just.
Yeah, that's great. But do you know? And in terms of speed, do you notice a difference between like straight line top end, like 40-yard sprint versus like the 15-yard, 5-yard sort of quickness? Because I feel like the eye test with players is so different on that. Like there are times where I'll mention to a coach, oh, I don't know if this player has much speed. And they're like, she's our fastest player. But it doesn't always look in sort of small spaces. Do you notice that with yourself of like the difference in that sort of speed versus quickness stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the thing last year, like Peyton Linehan was really, like she had a really good burst. And so she looked insanely fast because she's able to like get in front of people, obviously. Yep. I'd say like my burst is not average, but like not outstanding. Like it's not like Peyton Linehan's, obviously. And so I think if I had like a longer length, like I would look fast.
Yeah.
Like faster at least. But we have some girls on our team who have really fast bursts, and that's why they play on the wing typically, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Get by people one by one. So I'm going to put you on the seat. I mean, you know these dudes' names, your brothers, John and George, I'm assuming. But last week I got burned by a bio on an athletics website.
Really?
Well, I just said they liked to kayak and they didn't. But I looked like
kind of a random fact.
I looked like a fool, Kaitlyn. But your brothers are John and George? Yes. Who's the better athlete?
Oh, probably. I mean, George just cares more about sports.
Okay. So
I'd say George because of that, but John honestly is a good athlete as well. He just didn't care.
What about between your parents? Where do your genes come through? Let's start some drama.
Oh, they're both going to take offense if I say the other one. My mom ran at Minnesota in college, cross country and track, and then my dad played soccer at a smaller school, and so they both like obviously were athletic.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a hard question. My dad will take a lot of offense if I say my mom. So I don't really want to answer.
Our dad played a lot of sports, but my mom, there wasn't sports for her. She probably would have been a better athlete than her. I don't know. It's hard to picture him now and think of how athletic he was then. But he did play a lot of sports at Nevis High School. So yeah.
Shout out the Tigers.
Yeah, and speaking of high school, you won Miss Minnesota Soccer, which is cool. We talk to people all the time who are in and try to have them guess the final list. I didn't look up the list for you to guess who else was the Metro Team of the Year. But I'm asking about the trophy because that trophy is huge. And there's a picture of you holding it. And for people's scale, it's like 2.5 feet and it's like 2 feet wide. So it must not be one you get, right? It's just that exists.
You get it for the year. And so it was at my school. It was at my school for the year.
Oh.
Yeah.
They should let you personally, because you're done with high school most of the time. They should let you take that to college.
So you I know it was in our awards.
Cool.
Whatever that is.
It's big, man.
Yeah.
It's like the Heisman.
For my spring semester of high school.
Cool.
But I don't know what they did after. I mean, I know they gave it back. But
Cool.
I wasn't there, so.
Did you get anything otherwise, like a medal or did you get anything otherwise?
Yeah, they gave you a little plaque, like a rectangle plaque that
You
like,
guys got to do big. Miss Minnesota soccer. It's got to be bigger than a plaque. It's that someone at least someone told us once when Jenny Bender was like All American. She got a letter jacket, like a jacket.
We need more of this.
I guess we got to.
Also, now we are going to be forced to like make this crap for these players because they deserve weird prizes. And you've won so many different awards. Okay, like you like USA Today stuff, all these top drawer stuff, whatever. Like you've been all conference, whatever. Is there any like award like that where you've gotten something that was kind of cool, like either a cool trophy or like a crystal soccer ball or whatever? Money.
You get money now.
I'm trying to think. You get certificates for Big Ten. That's it. For like MVP of our team, you get like a little Nittany Lion thing. So I got that from last. I actually haven't gotten it yet, but they had that, and that's what I get.
Okay. Wait, what's it made out? Like, what's it made out of? Is it like just like a trophy? Like
I honestly have no idea. It's like a little. It's not that big. It's like this big, and it just like has a Nittany Lion. And it says like offensive MVP. Like
okay.
What is a Nittany Lion, Kaitlyn?
It's like
a real animal.
It's a mountain. Not anymore. We have Mount Nittany, which is a mountain like nearby, and it's like a mountain lion from there. I believe is.
Oh, I just meant, is it an actual type of lion or?
Yeah.
It's a mountain lion technically
from that region. Gotcha.
Yeah, but they don't actually exist.
Never looked it up. Of all the Wikipedia, I've never Wikipedia'd it.
Also, on the subject of trophies and awards, you get a chance to really shape history here because Mark and I are pretty sure this year we're going to blow some money on this for players this fall because you all are cooking like too much, and we actually probably are going to either like do trophies or some kind of whatever. What you get to really weigh in right now. What would you appreciate most? Like a trophy or a Bizarro clothing item or just straight up gift certificate cash stuff? Like what would be the most impactful?
How would it not be cash?
Right. Let's say other than cash and or gift certificate, what form of like a trophy or award would be most meaningful?
I honestly think like something clothing would be cool because like trophies just sit there. Like you don't do anything with them. And honestly, like all of mine are at my parents' house right now. Like I don't look at them. Like I don't do anything with them. I give my certificates to them and they get put in a drawer.
Yeah.
So probably something like that.
Okay. Good. And we'll brainstorm with you. We'll send you some designs. We'll get feedback. Don't worry. It'll be iterative. We'll work through it.
So thank you so much for hanging out. Last thing before you leave, Kaitlyn, I was watching. Look, everyone watching this today, heartbroken from watching the Lynx last night, but it was a sweet series. I was hyped on that whole series. Who's your favorite non-soccer athlete of any kind?
Oh.
And also, what's your favorite sport to watch other than soccer?
My favorite sport to watch other than soccer is definitely hockey.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a lame answer.
No.
Other than soccer, probably Serena Williams. That's kind of a basic answer too, but she's legendary and has paved the path for women's sports. So
I mean, just like in the U.S. we also just have these women that it's like just unfair levels of greatness. Yes. Like the gymnastics era we're in now, the Williams sisters era. It's like this is crazy stuff.
No, man, I live in a building with a woman spray painted on it, and that's the reason people come here. So, shout out to Megan Rapinoe. But thank you, Kaitlyn. Do you want to shout out anyway for people to like follow you on social media or anything like that, or follow the team? We know you're, like we said, Big Ten tournament's coming up for you personally.
Yeah, I'll shout out Penn State Women's Soccer. It's Penn State WSoc. Have some pretty cool stuff going up on like Instagram, Twitter. It's all the same. So
and Penn State's final regular season game is against cross-border rival Ohio State, a huge game. And like we said, Penn State at least fairly likely to be playing on October 31st. If not, it'll be November 2nd. We will be tweeting all and posting all about this for days and days and days, so folks will see it. But Kaitlyn, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck. Love it.
All right.
I'm pumped for the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah. Big Ten tournament is going to be absolutely wild. We've said it a million times. We'll keep saying it. October 31st, November 2nd, November 3rd, 3 games a day. It's sort of set up to be kind of like a 3 p.m., 6 p.m. deal. Obviously check the official schedule and whatever, but it's going to be absolutely stacked for Gopher fans tuning in. Minnesota took home all 6 points this last weekend, which is huge because it clinched their spot. The seeding kind of matters, kind of doesn't for these lower, the 7 through 10 teams.
Yeah,
essentially all of them have to hope that Washington eats it against Oregon. If Oregon can beat Washington, there's a scenario where sort of any of these teams could somehow squeak in to that 6th spot. And the reason you want to be in the top 6 is those 6 get to skip that opening day, so they don't have to play until Saturday or Sunday. So otherwise, we mentioned Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Minnesota all in the Big Ten tournament. So there's going to be Minnesotans in basically every single one of these games, or almost every one of these games. So really excited, and it's going to be right at ELR. I'll be broadcasting 6 games in 4 days. So let's get nuts.
Send Matt a Venmo money so he can order some tea via DoorDash to the stadium to keep talking. Tea with honey. Yeah, this dude's going to have to prep.
All right. Mark, let's jump into some Summit League stuff. The Summit League is absolutely drunk. It is going absolutely crazy. There's sort
Bison
of
times, baby.
a couple different battles going on. Battle still for that top seed-ish. Battle of sort of the top 5 in general, and then a battle for that 6th spot, which is actually still very much in the swing. How do the standings look heading into the final few games?
I thought we're Bison time, baby. I'm like Newton Big Green, but I'm a Bison. I'm not a goat. North Dakota State is rolling. I'd love to get some insight from. We'll have to try to get a player on or a coach at some point in this run.
Yep.
Because I want to hear from them what changed this year. They consistently are the team working to get 5th or 6th, and kind of maybe missing the 6-team Summit League. This year, it came together in the conference. So North Dakota State is up top, 16 points. South Dakota State, 13, but they have another game to play. Mm-hmm. So pressure on both teams to try to become the host. Theoretically, Omaha could maybe become the host, but it would require a lot of other stuff going on. So Omaha, Denver, and Oral Roberts all at 11 and 12 points, so safely in playoff contention. Mm-hmm. But the race is really between South Dakota, Kansas City, and North Dakota for actually making the spot. South Dakota's holding the last spot with 6 points. Kansas City and North Dakota have 3 points. Fully up in the air. Yeah,
Kansas City, I believe, has now been eliminated only because they lost to South Dakota head-to-head. And so shout out to Sarah at the Summit League, who got us an answer within like 10 minutes this morning on the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker for that six spot is going to be absolutely nuts. So we have South Dakota has a couple remaining games. Sorry, I want to make sure I don't get this wrong. So South Dakota plays Oral Roberts and Denver. 2 unbelievably tough games. Like, those are really, really tough games. Mm-hmm. And North Dakota plays St. Thomas, and the tiebreaker, so they tied when they played each other. That's why I mentioned it. So North Dakota could jump up and tie them, but they would, to win the tiebreaker, they have to beat South Dakota in conference-only goal differential. So basically, if South Dakota loses to both Oral Roberts and Denver by multiple goals, and somehow North Dakota can beat St. Thomas by a couple, they could claim it. But it's just, so that 6th spot is going to be absolutely deranged.
Opposite of what I said. Absolutely not wide open. Very specific. Matt, Matt he was talking to the league. I didn't have the league talking to me.
But let's go back and throw some shine on some of these players for the Bison, because they're 3 points ahead of South Dakota State, and they also have the tiebreaker because they beat them head to head. And so they really are in pole position. It would be such a cool thing for them to be able to host the semis and the finals. Who are some of the offensive players who've been getting them there?
Yeah, fairly balanced output. They have one really standout performer in Morgan Russman, who has 9 goals and 3 assists. Crazy. Really big output. They've only played, 14 games. I mean, he's scoring and producing goals. Crazy. Devin Kavanaugh, 4 goals, 5 assists. Olivia Watson, who I think we had on back when they went to England, has 4 goals, 2 assists. Hannah Arnold, 3 goals, 4 assists, and Gabriel Garrett, 3 goals, 3 assists. So I like to see a team that has a handful of options, handful of people who can step up. But obviously Russman, shout out, because the Bison haven't often had people with goal numbers like that in the last couple of years. A lot of shared offensive output there usually from what I remember seeing. So yeah, shout out to those folks. And then, maybe later I'll do a better dive on getting defenders some shine, but shout out to the people getting the offense done.
Well, and you mentioned sort of them just really clicking come conference time. I mean, the Summit League has always had a lot of parity. Look at seeds 1 through 5 this year, for example. But for the Bison, how have they looked? Because sometimes those conference, non-conference splits can be kind of wild. But how have they looked comparatively?
I always feel like the teams in the lower end of conferences tend to build easier non-conference schedules, and I feel like that's typically how NDSU has done it. This year they did mix in some bigger matchups. I mean, they played Minnesota, but they also mixed in, like some other teams will mix in D2s or NAIA or just really small D1 programs. And so even through that, in a not horribly challenging non-conference, they were just 4-4-2, which is fine and good to get them going, but they have caught fire at the exact right time. Which is what a team in the Summit League has to do, because you're not going to get unless you have some amazing situation in that large bid, right? So NDSU, I don't think they honestly came in thinking we're going to the NCAA tournament. Maybe they did. This is bulletin board material for you guys if you did, because I wouldn't have thought you were, but maybe you were. But now they are in a place where they're actually thinking, we're in a place where we beat these other good teams.
Yep.
Can play in the Summit League tournament and beat the same teams we beat. They've only lost once. And wild to be thinking, but you have to think they're confident because they're 5-1-1. And just a tough, and like even the 1-0 loss to Minnesota, that was at the end of their non-conference. I'd have to think that gave the team some belief, because this is a good Minnesota team, and to see them hold on for 1-0 had to make them think we can play with big teams. We can whatever.
And the Gophers didn't get that goal until late. I was at home with COVID, so I wasn't calling that game, but I was watching it from home. NDSU, like, not only were they in the game until very late in that one, they controlled the game for like 20 opening minutes or something, like at least 10. They were controlling that game. Like that is absolutely wild. Anyway, whatever. Huge props to the Bison. I mean, we love stories like this just because, so many of these teams are easy to root for, but for a team like NDSU, like you said, that's usually battling for playoff contention, now they're in a position, to possibly host the Summit League tournament. And just remind folks again how that format works, because 6 teams make it, so there's a little bit of separation there.
Yeah, it's in the Summit League, it's kind of the opposite of some of the other conferences we cover. It is pretty forgiving to make it, but to make the 1 and 2 is a big deal. To make the 1 seed is a bigger deal. So the first 2 seeds have byes. The first games happen between the 3 and 6, 4 and 5, just at home sites. And then it moves to the semis and home, all being at the home of the top seed. So North Dakota State's in a place where they have a cool stadium, by the way. If you haven't been there, because it's the old NDSU football stadium, it's really big, but it's in full soccer turf, right, Matt? It's not printed with football.
No, there's football lines on it or whatever, but it's
the next time we get turf, it'll turn.
It's huge, and it's a big concrete like stands, and so it can hold every single Summit League fan that wants to make that trip. And
imagine all the Dakota schools, because I mean there's going to be South Dakota State fans, there's going to be, if South Dakota makes it, and even some Denver fans, I'm sure. But
could be UND. So either UND or South Dakota. Right. And I really like the way the Summit League does that tournament, because you get a huge benefit for being 1. You get a really significant benefit for being 2. Like, it creates an incentive, because not playing in that opening round in a league like the Summit League is so huge. We've seen upsets on that first day of Summit League tournament play so many times. Like, Omaha destroys people's dreams on that first day, like every single year. Like, they go in and they just ruin your conference tournament. And so, especially this year when so many of these teams are so close together, you're like finishing 2, like if South Dakota State can finish strong and claim that 2 spot, yes, they'd rather be hosting, but even getting second is so big. And so Denver's on their heels, Omaha's on their heels, Oral Roberts is on their heels. Just absolutely nuts.
Denver's dropped a few more games this year than usual, but still it's like like I said, only one team makes the tournament, and it's the champion of the conference. There's not any at-large potential here, so anyone. I mean, I wouldn't bet on anyone. I would take an open bet for the field on the Summit League tournament.
It's going to be such a blast to follow. We might not be able to cover. I'm going to triple check the exact overlapping dates. We might not be able to cover the quarterfinal round super closely because I'll be calling the Big Ten games. But I am absolutely planning on being there for the semi, maybe even for the final that next weekend, just because it's going to be so cool. So the first two first games will be that November 2nd, November 3rd time. We haven't seen the final dates. And then the semi and final will be the 7th and the 10th. Same semi and final as the Big Ten tournament. So a lot of overlap in tournament season. But yeah, cannot wait. Summit League's going to be an absolute blast.
Wow. I guess let's do a little quick hit on the NSIC before we go. Minnesota State still undefeated, which wild. Good for them. 8 wins, 0 losses, 2 draws, 26 points. Far and away the top to be the top seed post. But yeah, Matt, talk about who else you saw move. I mean, you I think took some notes, at least like Wayne getting a result, Bemidji got a single point in the Dakotas this weekend. So they're sitting in, a tough spot of where they could drop. The seeds are so close. They could drop all the way to 7, 8.
Yeah. Your NSIC piece talked about this. We talk about this all the time. The NSIC is sort of the opposite of the Summit. 15-team conference. Next year will be 16 with the Jimmies. And that means the schedule just naturally becomes fairly imbalanced. And so Bemidji really did a great job bringing up wins against maybe the lower teams on the table. They took care of business. They did their work. But now, last weekend, they hosted the Dakota schools. They hosted Minot and Mary. They only come away with a single point. We mentioned it. You put it in the piece. They have a really, really tough remaining schedule. And they still should be comfortably able to finish in that tournament field. But that means, can they stay in the top 4? There's 3 teams tied at 19 points, and they have the toughest remaining schedule of all of them. There's still a Bemidji versus Mankato game, by the way, on November 1st, which is absolutely wild. Cannot wait for that. Augie and Bemidji play on the 27th. CSP and Mary play on the 27th. Like the standings between second through 8th are only separated by 4 points. 19, 19, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. And then
you could flip it and then Winona and Wayne are behind and could make it up. So they're the people on the edge. You could also argue, I guess, because it is so close, who cares about seeding then? Because they're going to play teams that are really close to them. They know they're going to the pitch in Mankato for Minnesota State.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, don't get hurt.
I would say right now, even when Mankato dropped points, they tied Wayne, which is sort of a huge result for Wayne and sort of a tough result for the Mavs, obviously. Yeah. But I still think, like you said, Mankato they have to be considered the clear cut. I mean, they're almost certainly going to finish in first, which means, but the only other reason the seeding matters is so the way the NSIC works is the top 4 host 5 through 8 in the first round. Yeah. And that has been upset city too. So Concordia went down to Mankato, took out the Mavs last year, and different than the Summit League, it's the top remaining seed that hosts the semifinals.
Oh, I did forget that.
And so it does matter in the sense that you want to have the easiest first round game that you can. Although I would say basically none of the first round games are going to be easy. And the really cool thing about the NSIC tournament, they play that opening round on Monday. So Mark and I are super free and clear. We're going to do a whip around. We're going to do a watch along for all of those. It's 4 games in one day. It's going to be nuts. Yeah. But watch the standings for who finishes in that top 4, because hosting that first game should have some bonus. We talked about, I went up to St. Cloud to watch the Huskies, a huge come from behind win against Northern, a good Northern State team. So they claim all 6 points on the weekend, which means they jump from 6th up to 2nd in a single weekend. And so watch out for them. Watch out for Augie, who has been absolutely lethal. Mary has been dangerous. Northern, Concordia, Minot, all these schools, like you said, in some sense, it's dude, they're all good. They all can play. But watch for that top 4 because it's just been absolute mayhem. It's just crazy.
Yeah. We'll see who we can get on to help us watch some of these games. We've had Christy Kopitz help give us some insight. We'll see if we get maybe some former players. Monday's a good day for maybe those couple pro players from Mankato are off on a Monday. We don't know, but
maybe we'll bring in the big dog. Maybe we'll go get a vetter.
Yeah, or even we've never had. We could always have Mariah Wynn to retrospect about her snow games in Bemidji. So,
True.
But no,
True.
Everyone stay tuned. We'll do a ton of NSIC coverage. And next week we'll get into another D1 Minnesotans piece where definitely we'll have a good slate of kind of what teams are slated to be in potential for the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
We have some insights from. What is it, Matt? The place you had getting that RPI type performance index from Inkblot?
That's for D2, and then we're gonna have there's a D1 expert who we're gonna have on too. We're gonna try and get both of them on for a show in the next few weeks, just as tournament time shapes up. Mm-hmm. And then St. Thomas had their final home game of the year, a nice send-off win for them. Just shout out, villain season. They knocked Kansas City out of the Summit League tournament picture, so they spoiled some dreams, which is great. That huge senior class, just want to give them a shout out. We did it on social too, but they played their final home game at Southfield. Now they're on the road in North Dakota for the weekend, so just shout them out. Minnesota still has one more regular season game against Iowa, and so Barrett Parton and Maya Hansen are coming up to play at ELR.
Big game.
That's on Sunday. So if folks want to go, if you're a Maya Hansen fan or a Barrett Parton fan, go check them out. And then obviously they'll come back up the next week for the Big Ten tournament. So
the betting line on that one, Matt, is bet on Harper and Barrett to score, and that would be like a plus 100 maybe on $100. Like I said, with my betting experience, but I would bet I would pick a draw. I'm saying that's a 2-2 draw.
Yeah.
Barrett, Parton, and Kaya score. So whoever has to pay me after this.
Yeah, it's a parlay of Paige Kala gets an assist,
Kaya
Harper gets a goal, Barrett Parton gets a goal, and Maya Hansen gets a goal. Let's do a parlay on that.
Saying a parlay. This is a man who he was showing me his tickets. He was about to win. If the links, by the way, shout out to a real one. Matt lost a bunch of winnings that he would have got if the Lynx would have won last night. He was showing me his tickets from the casino.
If only.
Thank you to everyone who came to watch the Lynx, by the way, in the bar. NWSL playoffs, not something we focus a lot on, but it will be coming up very soon. They have another round. And then when the playoffs start, here at the Blackheart, we'll throw it on. If you ever want to show up, unless it's Amazon Prime, in which case you can sign into your own Amazon Prime. But we will put the NWSL on. We will certainly have the Big Ten tournament on here for all the games that we can. So as always, you're home for women's soccer.
Thanks so much to Pentz Homes. Thanks to Nate and Lydia for supporting us and making this stuff possible. When we do our Summit League tournament travel, that's going to be possible because of the support they give us, because of the support our patrons give us. So throw a couple bucks our way. We are willing to drive across and fly across the entire country and even internationally. We are nuts. So appreciate that. And thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you.